find it fascinating to talk to the people we are opposing, because throughout every civil service you find people who are very good at giving the official line. And the official line on this is nothing to be worried about. There's nothing sinister here. This is very boring, benign stuff. Don't worry about it. So, and it's not secret, as they just check the website. So once again, something like pastors saying, don't worry, it's not even going to happen. The central message here is whatever we do in civil society, we shouldn't worry or trouble ourselves about it, because it's either not dangerous or not going to happen anyway. And as Ralph was alluding to this, we've been through this before. I mentioned that I was senior policy advisor for the Ministry of Environment in the 80s, from 86 to 88. And I recall clearly, because as Ralph was wondering, did the minister know? No, the minister did not know. Tom McMillan, as Minister of Environment, asked me repeatedly to check in with the negotiating teams on the free trade agreement and make sure Canadian water was not at risk. I was repeatedly told, and also we kept asking to have an Environment Canada official in the room in the negotiations. Simon Reisman, the person we didn't mention, who was on the board of the Grand Canal Scheme, we didn't mention by name, didn't want an Environment Canada official in the room. They said, don't worry, there's nothing about the environment being negotiated here. So this is within the inner sanctum of how the government negotiated the free trade agreement. This, don't worry, go away, it will be exempted. And since we were at the time working on the federal water policy and on, of course, the act that would have given it teeth, I admit I wasn't particularly, I was worried, but I was reassured continually. And I felt, since I was speaking on behalf of the Minister of Environment and making my inquiries, I could take those assurances to the bank. Clearly not. North American Free Trade Agreement took it even farther. There's been a lot of attention in the media lately about pesticide residues. I just want to make sure you know that the Committee to Harmonize Pesticide Residues to avoid trade irritants was started under the Free Trade Agreement. We have been, for the last 15 years, reducing reducing the strength of our regulations, but actually that means increasing the residue levels of pesticides that are permitted. Because whenever we do happen, there's spot checks at the border. If we check our fruits and veggies at the border and an inspector from the Canadian government finds higher levels of pesticides on fruits and vegetables, that shipment is sent back if it doesn't meet Canadian regulations. And the response to this has been, and it's not new, has been to increase the Canadian levels of exposure that are permissible. And we've already done this for captan, which is carcinogenic. We've already done this for pyrophos, which is a neurotoxin. So we've seen this happening. It's accelerating under the Security and Prosperity Partnership, but it started with the Free Trade Agreement. It increased under the North American Free Trade Agreement, and particularly the regulation around toxic chemicals, pesticides, gas and additives became particularly difficult to control once Chapter 11 was added into the mix, which for those of you who might not know, I think this audience is fairly savvy, but what was called an investor state provision, that there would be no expropriation without compensation to any corporation doing business in any of the three NAFTA nations. I have talked to people who actually negotiated that, and I believe them that they didn't realize it would be used in the way it's being used. Maybe I'm naive to believe them, but they were fairly stunned to find that the definition of investor would be stretched to mean anyone who opened a post office box in a Canadian jurisdiction to say that that constituted their office, and that they wanted to do business in Canada constituted an investor. And expropriation did not mean taking their physical assets, but any new regulation or law that would reduce their expectation of profit. So that banning a pesticide, banning a neurotoxic gas and all these are real examples where we've seen a chilling effect from